Well, good afternoon, everybody. I know most of you, but my name is Genevieve Judge, and I serve as the Public Information Officer for the Sarasota Police Department. Thank you all for joining us today to have a little bit more of an overview of our body-worn camera program. Up first this afternoon is going to be Chief Jim Rieser, who's going to kind of give you a 30,000-foot view, if you will, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty with our body-worn camera manager, Peter Ferranti. So with that, Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Genevieve. Good afternoon, everybody. Just like Genevieve said, I'm Chief Jim Reese with the Sarasota Police Department. I'd like to thank the members of the media for coming today. I really appreciate that. This is a historic day for our agency. Today, we announce the start of the Sarasota Police Department body-worn camera program. This program will enhance accountability and public trust. It will produce maximum transparency for our agency and the community. The body-worn camera equipment is the wave of the future for law enforcement. We are excited to be part of this cutting-edge technology, which will allow us to provide the highest level of service to the citizens of Sarasota. We started this project last year in June, July 2020. This project included commission approval, funding, hiring of a body-worn camera manager, writing policy, training our supervisors and officers, and educating the community. And that's why you're here today. We want everybody in the community to know that our police officers that are going to calls for service, that are out there, they have the body-worn camera on them. By the end of the week, everyone in our patrol division will have it. We're very excited about this program. We were extremely fortunate when we were able to hire Peter Ferranti as our body-worn camera manager. He comes with incredible knowledge and experience. He was a sergeant at the Las Vegas Police Department, where he started their body-worn camera program with approximately 2,200 cameras. We have 122 cameras. Finally, I believe the Sarasota Police Department is the best agency in the country. The men and women who work here are some of the finest and most hardworking people I've ever known, both civilian and sworn. The support from our community is strong, and I believe this program will only serve to increase their trust and support. Peter's going to give you a presentation. He is our body-worn camera manager. He is the reason today that this program is coming out ahead of schedule. We're looking for a July start date, and here it is in May. By the end of the week, the officers will be trained. We have a few makeups, but he is the reason this program has been such a success, and we're really looking forward to it. With that, I'll give you Peter Ferranti.
Thank you, Chief. Hi, and welcome. As Chief said, my name is Peter Ferranti. I'm a 31-year law enforcement officer, recently retired. Moved back to Sarasota to come back home because my wife was born and raised here, and the opportunity came up to join Sarasota Police Department. So I was very excited to do that, very excited to bring my knowledge about body-worn cameras to this police department and make it go forward into this new technology. I have a quick presentation, so I'll just get started with that, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers about anything you guys might have questions about. So first, why do we do body-worn cameras? Mainly because it objectively records officer-citizen contacts and critical incidents that officers experience out on the street. Number two, it enhances the accuracy of officers' reports and testimony in court. Recent changes in Florida law have guaranteed the right of officers to review that video prior to making their reports, and we can do that under this wonderful system we have where the officers can view their video on their department phone as they're writing reports out in the field. They don't have to come back here to the station or anything like that. They can stay out on the road. It investigates and resolves complaints against officers, whether that's a complaint that goes through the Internal Affairs Office or a simple complaint where a supervisor on the street gets a phone call. That supervisor can meet with the officer, review that video, and adjust that complaint and do whatever needs to be done about that particular complaint. It also documents searches, crime scenes, and evidence impounds, because while we're out there on the street doing those things, our cameras are on and it's recording everything we're doing. And finally, it promotes public perceptions about agency accountability, accountability through transparency. So this is us out there showing you what we're doing on a daily basis, what these professional officers are doing every time they interact with citizens out on the streets. So, some of you who remember back in 2014, this program was originally started. It hit some snags with Florida law and some other things that occurred back then. Now that's been changed in the 2017 legislation. It passed some changes that allowed us to be able to film out on the streets. So we've gotten past all those hurdles and we've moved forward, as the chief said. It went through City Commission and everyone here at SPD to get it started prior to my arrival. And cameras were bought, funding was in place, all that sort of stuff happened, and I started here in January. Right now, we're using the Axon Body 3 camera system, and this is what the camera looks like. Everything is all encompassed in here. It has the DVR built inside. It has the ability to stream to the phone so the officers can review it. The battery power is in here, and everything's all encompassed in one unit that the officers wear up on their chests. As Chief said, the funding was put in place. All this was purchased ahead of time. We have one of the best programs because it's an all-encompassing system, and I compare it to back in the day, your phones, you used to have to pay for minutes, then you had to pay per gigabytes, and now most people have that all-inclusive plan where you pay a monthly fee and you have unlimited data, sort of a thing. So that's what we have with our camera system. It's one of those things where next year we won't have to have more funding because we won't have an overage in storage charges or something like that. It's all built into the monthly fees we already pay. Moving on to training and deployment. We have started our training back on April 21st. We're approximately 75% completed. These 12 cameras in front of me today are for this afternoon's class, and those 12 cameras will be out on the street starting tomorrow to increase the numbers we have out on the street. We're starting with patrol, but we're also including our detectives, our internal affairs, and our end users being the state attorney's office, other legal agencies, and then finally we'll have public dissemination, which we're also preparing and getting ready for when those requests come in. We've also coordinated with the state attorney's office. It's an established system right now where Northport is using the same product we are, Manatee is using the same product we are, and so it's already flowing to them that way. We're just going to join into that flow to send our cases to them for their prosecutorial efforts. This is the camera. As I was stating, it films at 30 frames per second, MP4 format with a 720 resolution. It is Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and GPS enabled. The batteries come with a 12+ hour battery life, which works for our 12-hour shifts. And it films at 146-degree diagonal point of view, which means that it's a very large wide angle that captures everything the officer sees in front of him. When you get to 146 degrees, you're really pushing the limits. If you go much further than that, you end up with that bubble fisheye look that you can get in some lenses, and we certainly don't want that. Another thing we've done is we've looked into the needs of some of our specialized units. We have some Flex 2 cameras, which are a different setup, and we're going to be utilizing them and pushing those out to some training to our SWAT officers and our emergency response team officers because they wear so much gear in the chest area where the camera's normally worn. We're getting them cameras that mount on their helmets, and that way they can utilize their safety helmets and have camera to do the duties that their job entails. So we have 32 of those, and then 122 for the patrol officers. These are the docks. We have these set up downstairs. They're already up and running. That's before we had a camera in there. Right now, if you went down, there's probably 50 or 60 cameras in the different slots. 16 docks, 128 ports for the 122 cameras. It's a very simple process. When the officer finishes their shift, they simply take their camera off, put it in the port, make sure that it's docked and connected properly, and the light sequencing starts, and then the docks do all the other work. Recharges the battery automatically, offloads the video up to the cloud for storage into that officer's account for future access, and then if there's any software firmware updates that come down from Axon to increase the effectiveness and the use of the camera, it gets those updates. The training class is a 6-hour training class that we've given to all officers, or we are giving to all officers. We're going over policy, when, where, and how to follow legal guidelines. Our legal expert, Joe Polzak, comes in and does his legal portion of it, and he's been doing that part. We go over operation and functionality. There's manual features and automated features of each camera. We go over public records laws, dissemination, redaction, and we talk about practical and scenario training, the manual actions and the verbal articulation of when you're interacting with people and when you're filming in front of people. One of the things I like to show in this picture is that this camera is not going to be perfect. It's not going to film every single incident. We're going to strive to shoot for 100%, but we're human. Sometimes there's electronic failures. Sometimes if an officer gets in with struggle with an individual, all that's going to film is the two individuals up close to each other. You're not going to get an overall picture. It's not like a cop's video where there's 3 different camera angles like you guys have here today and a boom mic and all that sort of stuff. It films what it can film. This particular incident, I think if I didn't circle the area where the white blob is, you wouldn't even know that that's an individual that had just fired at the officer and struck the police car, and that the officer had time to just pull out his gun and return fire because the officer can see with his human eyes much better than the camera can see. But at 30 frames per second, we can dial it down and pull out a single frame like this and isolate where the bad guy was running across firing at the officer and use it to prosecute that individual. At a study done in Las Vegas Metro Police between 2015 and 2020, we have found that 67% of complaints that come in against officers get completely cleared out by the existence of a body-worn camera. And that's not saying that 67% of those cases are false claims. What it is that 67% of them, the officers did what they did, but it was within policy and it was legal, but it was still upsetting to the citizen. And maybe the officer had to run to an emergency and didn't have time to explain to the citizen what the action the officer took. They can feel infringed, they can complain, and then a supervisor or an internal affairs detective can review it on the body cameras, explain to the citizen, give the citizen some understanding, and clear out 67% of those just because the body camera video captured whatever the officer did. Moving on, video evidence will lead to more open and transparent policing. It will lead to better plea bargaining and convictions because we have video evidence of sometimes even the crime in progress, but other times it's giving suspects Miranda warnings, having them legally waive their Miranda warnings, and then confess to parts of the crime, and also collection of evidence in the field. We're capturing that on video. It will lead to clearer investigations into complaints, as I've stated, and it will give a review of daily police practice. What I'm saying here is that we didn't realize in the beginning when we started this back in my old department in 2014 that not only we're going to deal with citizens' complaints against us, we're also going to learn about our own behavior as police officers. And we're going to learn, oh, we need to change this because it's unsafe, or this is a great example of how we need to do something, and we need to push that out in the next training cycle to all the officers as an example of a wonderful thing an officer did, whether that's how they interview somebody or talk to somebody or a tactic in the field or something like that. And yes, when we do make errors, we'll be able to review those errors and on the next training cycle go, hey, we don't want to do this anymore because this is not the safest thing and the best thing for everybody involved. So that review will come into play. Finally, body-worn camera use demonstrates commitment to our Sarasota Police Department core values of integrity, accountability, commitment, and professionalism. Any questions?
When you roll this out to a law enforcement agency, like you did in Vegas, or just in general, how do you sell this to the officers? Is this something that a lot of the officers already want, or if there's somebody who's reluctant, what do you tell them to sell this to them?
And please stay, I'm sorry, before you begin, please stay right at the microphone exactly where you are. Pull
Yes, sir.
Step up to the microphone.
You got it. Sorry about that. So it helps that I have 31 years of being an officer out on the street. And I can, my last 2 years after we started our program and in 2018, basically my deputy chief came to me and said, Pete, you did a great job. It's another tool in the tool belt. We don't need you anymore. And I went back to the road. I was a field training sergeant and I had a squad and new recruits coming through. So I put the camera on. So my last 2 years I was wearing it on the street. But before that, I still had many years. And basically, cops don't like change. They're reluctant to change. They like doing it the same way. It's comfortable. It's safe. When you explain to them that this can help them, and then the examples come in, and we've seen them now because it's not 2014 anymore, it's 2021. We've all seen examples of when an officer makes mistakes, and that's on the news, and we've also seen examples when officers do the right thing, and that's on the news. And the amount of cases that get investigated with the video evidence that helps out the case, and prosecuted, and complaints that are frivolous, and complaints that are in error because the citizen just didn't know. When you explain those things and you give the scenarios and the examples, the officers understand it. And they go, oh, really, that's gonna work for me. So when they leave the class, I know they're still, they've just got 6 hours of training. It's a lot of material we throw at them. But I explained to them that in my experience doing the 2,200 that I did out in Vegas, after a couple of weeks and a month, I get stopped in the hallway. This is the best thing since sliced bread. This is a wonderful tool. It's fantastic. I had a complaint last week and it went away because it didn't happen. Or I captured this evidence and we've got a great case against this criminal. We can keep him off the street so he can't victimize the citizens anymore. All that sort of stuff. So all those examples have been around for years now. And we at SPD now are jumping into this program and we're going to have those examples. We've already had our first request from the state attorney's office, so we've sent that video to them. And we're just going to keep going forward, giving the officers those examples. So they learn and change slowly and they become much more receptive to it in a very short period of time after putting the cameras on their chests.
You bring in all this. Oh,
I got to add to that. So this is a.
Step up to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. You asked about the police officers. Are they excited about this? They absolutely are. This is the wave of the future for law enforcement. This starts from the top down. I know it's the wave of the future, and I'm excited about this program. I think about all the calls for service that I had gone to, and I'm not talking about complaints. Complaints I know is the big issue here, but guess what? There's all the evidence that they're going to be able to capture at a theft, at a burglary, at a criminal mischief. It's an opportunity for us, and we have a young police department. We've hired a lot of people, and very capable, very, very smart people. And if you're not in the body-worn camera program, you're just not thinking forward. And that's what we're here. You know, our governing body, the city commission, the mayor, city staff, the community, everybody I've talked to wants this, and so do we. So the officers are excited to go to this program and the training with Peter. So we're really, really looking forward to it. Thank you.
And Chief, what is the policy for the officers, for example, like cussing and, I mean,
Right.
obviously they may slip up or whatever, and then could they be fired? I mean, what is the deal?
So that's why we have a policy. One of the things that I implemented when we started this program, I started an entire new position in our internal affairs. That detective will do nothing but watch body-worn camera footage. He'll be able to make real-time decisions on whether we need training, policy revision, or accountability, just as you talked about. We're still sticking to our policies, and I think this is such a huge advantage for us, and I'm excited to be in this pool. Thank you.
Peter, you bring in so much experience to Sarasota, and I know the chief probably appreciates having you on the team. What are the biggest pitfalls that you've warned him about in terms of just things to think about in terms of technical glitches that might come up, unexpected costs? Like, what are the things that you've warned the chief about in terms of potential things that come up that you might not think about with these cameras?
A lot of preparation was done before I got here, and then when I got here, I got involved in adapting the policy and making some changes. What I've told the staff is that the policy has to be fluid in the beginning, because we can lay it down on paper and say this is the right way to do it, but the needs of our community, of Sarasota Police Department, may change and alter, and we may make some policy changes and may adjust things here and there. Nothing drastic, because we have a solid foundation, but that change might come up of just a procedural thing. Different ways we do stuff, but the foundation we have is a really, really solid foundation.
Let me ask that a different way then. Like, what are going to be the biggest challenges that Sarasota has faced in implementing it? Is it just the sheer storage size of the data? What's the biggest challenges?
No, all that stuff is covered in the program we have and in the monthly fees and all that. It's we have more training to do. We're getting the cameras on the street with the officers, but then we have classes that I'm going to be giving to the detectives, to SWAT, to ERT. We have our criminalistics people, and they might be incorporating some of their evidence that they collect into evidence.com, which is the cloud-based management system. So it's a matter of getting the rest of the department in tune. None of these challenges are hard. It'll just take some time to make adjustments and get everything in, but it's a great program. We've got a great department, and we're moving forward.
Chief, how important is it? We know that it's going to be great for evidence and for helping with crimes, but how important is it too in this day and age to also have something that kind of protects cops in a way? We see people with their cell phones when they start rolling in the middle of a situation, but to have that picture from start to finish.
This is an incredible
Could you
tool.
step up to the mic, Chief? I apologize.
Sorry. This is an incredible tool. I have to tell you, the training that the officers are receiving is state of the art, top notch. We have our city attorney there providing them the legal guidelines in which they have to abide by. Putting that person, that detective, in internal affairs to give real-time advice and direction on as far as training and policy issues. I think we're moving in the right direction. As far as the officers are concerned and protection for the officers, it absolutely is, but it's also protection for our community and our agency. I see this as a home run for the city of Sarasota, and also the police officers and the Sarasota Police Department. Thank you.
Peter, can you tell us how it actually operates, just briefly, kind of describe the operation?
Sure. It's a very simple device. The largest button you see in the front, this big round button, is your start-stop button. So when the officers come to work, they go down to the docks downstairs, they grab their camera, it's assigned by their badge numbers, they power it on, and when it's on, it's sitting in what we call a buffering standby mode. So it's on their chest, it's blinking green light on the top, it has readouts, and they know it's on and it's functional. Then they go out into the field, so they're getting in their cars, they're doing work, so they're not interacting with people, so it's not keeping that recording. When they interact with somebody, whether it's a call for service, or whether it's a self-initiated activity, stopping a speeder, or stopping an individual on the corner, or just interacting with somebody, it's this front button here called the event button, and they simply double tap it, and they press, and it starts that recording. It doesn't come off their chest, doesn't move, it's just, hello sir, how are you? Can I talk to you for a minute? That sort of an interaction. And then it keeps recording. When they're finished with that interaction and they've returned back to their car and they're ready to leave, it's simply a press and hold for 3 seconds. They get lights, they get tones, they get the tactile feel of the button. All those signals tell them it's turning on and recording and turning off and it's finished recording, and they go back to work, to the next call, or to whatever else they need to do, and it goes back in that standby buffering mode, waiting for the next call for service or the next initiated activity that they do. And it's really that simple.
Is there anything that could trigger, like a gunshot or something?
Yes, we have some specialized features that we also bought as part of our program, part of our monthly fee. Those specialized features are in those rare occasions that an officer doesn't have the time to turn it on and get it activated. They usually are called auto activations, and we have a few of those. The first one we have would be when an officer turns on his light bar in his vehicle. We've installed a device that when it gets to the second toggle setting and the lights all activate, the camera turns on if he hasn't or she hasn't already turned it on. So if you're manually activating it and then you decide to do a car stop and turn on your lights, it's already on, but the signal goes out anyway. The second one is from our tasers. When our tasers are drawn out, there's another notch that we turn the tasers from safe to the on position, and when the tasers turn into the on position, that also sends out that signal, because just in case the officer had to draw a taser, didn't get a chance to turn it on, that auto activation turns the camera on. We have another device we've installed on the officer's holsters, in between the holster that mounts to the belt and the holster that holds the gun. That is also an auto triggering device, so that when a firearm is drawn, so heaven forbid an officer goes from absolute nothing to a crazy situation where they have to draw their gun and engage with an individual, whatever that threat level is, when the gun comes out of the holster, that's an auto activation. The one you were speaking of is gunshot detection. That is also from the company, and we have that, but it's in beta form, which means that they're still working on it. This camera has 4 different microphones on it, 2 on the front, 2 on the bottom. Audio engineers with degrees bigger than mine are working on the technology so that those 4 microphones can triangulate and figure out that the sound that is occurring around an officer is not a car backfire, is not a slap on the table, but it's truly a gunshot. If it detects that it's a gunshot, it then auto activates the camera. So we're training the officers that if you get one of these triggers and you're not on, and it clicks on and you see it and it turns into recording, it sends them a notice on top of the LCD screen that says something just happened within range of you, and it's a 30-foot range is what they tell us from the manufacturer. We've experienced it to be even further than that. So the basic officer safety training is, if you get an auto activation, look around. What is going on? Is another partner of yours 10 feet away, facing the other way, doing a car stop? Is he pulling out his weapon? Whatever it is, look around, decide if you need to engage and help somebody out because you had that auto activation for some reason, or heaven forbid someone's actually firing gunshots in the area, address that threat that's coming your way. So these are wonderful extra features that are built in, and we have all of them. The only one with the gunshot detecting, like I said, is still in beta. We're still or Axon is still working on it, so we're having some false activations with that one specifically.
So when one camera is auto-activated, does it activate the cameras on the other officers around them?
Yes. So if I turn mine on in this room setting, every single one of the other cameras in this room are going to go off, because that is technically, you're correct, I should have said that. It's also an auto activation if I turn my camera on, sends out the signal within the 30-foot range to turn on everyone else's camera in my area.
How does the public know that it's running? And they come up to you and is it a secret that it's running, or what do we know?
In our policy, we're training the officers to articulate and explain that to people when they make initial contact with them, when it's safe and practical to do so. I mean, if you're drawing your firearm, you need to address that life-threatening event that you're drawing the firearm. But if I'm just meeting with someone and I'm responding to a call for service, then I can engage with them and go, hi, I'm Sergeant Ferranti, what's going on? By the way, I'm audio and video recording this. How can I help you? Tell me what's up. And we can engage that way. So we're teaching them under normal calm circumstances, you can let them know, and you should let them know that your audio and video recording them. It's not required by law, but that's a policy thing that we've implemented to let people know. Other than that, you guys are the ones that are getting the information out to the public that we've got them and they're running.
Did you say there was some type of light on there that would light up when it's recording?
At the very top in the LCD screen, there are different lights that show up,
Yeah.
but it's facing up towards the
Gotcha.
officer.
So the public wouldn't necessarily
The
see-
public doesn't know,
Okay,
correct.
Gotcha.
When you speak to officers about the importance of public records laws, we from the press operate sometimes with public record requests, sometimes occasionally things like the Freedom of Information Act. What do you kind of tell the officers, and what's the feedback you get about why transparency with these public records laws and access to videos when appropriate is important?
I explained to them that since the day they put on the badge and went to work, they've been out in the public eye. They've been susceptible to cell phones on every street corner and people filming from upper apartments down on top of them and whatever else is going on. So it's just normal business that we're open and transparent to the public. We're just showing you our perspective of what the officer is interacting with somebody, because a lot of times when the public puts those videos that they make out, they put little snippets and they put out only partial videos. In our case, we're recording the entire thing and we're recording it, it's recording it unbiasedly. You know, I might have my opinion of whether that's a suspect or a victim, but the camera doesn't judge. The camera just records everything it records.
How often does the video get into court and convict the person?
It actually works, and I don't have any statistics on that for you, but it actually works before we get to court, before we get to trial. It's where if you actually captured the crime on video, which is happening all across departments across the country and the world, if you capture it on video, the video just unbiasedly tells you what happened. So you're never going to get to a trial with that because there's the video. So usually a negotiation is done and someone takes a plea bargain and they go forward that way. When you have other evidence, when we properly Miranda somebody on camera and they waive their Miranda rights on camera and then they confess to something on camera, again, you're not going to end up in a trial with that because we know who did it. They just confessed legally. So the negotiations between the prosecutorial arm and the defense arm, that's past our realm. That's the other side of it. But statistically, I know that they get more and better prosecutions by having video evidence of either the crime being committed or evidence being collected or even confessions.
Can you spell your first and last name, please?
Yes, first name Peter, P-E-T-E-R. Ferranti is F-E-R-R-A-N-T-I.
And your official title?
Body camera manager.
Okay, thanks.
I know a lot of you guys are working on deadlines, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We've got an officer who's wearing a body camera if you guys want video of that. We've got cameras up front. And
Thank
I
you.
think that's it. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.